When a company is obviously struggling, it has no choice but to change. It takes risks, listens more carefully. It remembers why people cared about its product in the first place. But when a company is making record profits, selling tens of millions of consoles and dominating its traditional competitor, it becomes incredibly easy to mistake financial success for strategic invincibility. The PS5 has now sold more than 93 million units. While PlayStation has around 125 million monthly active users, Sony's gaming division is enormously successful, and nobody can seriously claim that PlayStation is currently dying. But I'm not talking about today, I'm talking about the next generation. And when I look at Sony's current direction, the rising prices, the obsession with recurring revenue, the confused PC strategy, the continued pursuit of live service games, and the move away from physical ownership, I see a company that's becoming better at monetizing its existing audience without necessarily giving the next generation of players a compelling reason to join it. That is why I believe PlayStation could be left behind. Not because the PS6 will necessarily flop, but because the rest of gaming is evolving faster than Sony's idea of what a console platform should be. Sony's current strategy makes perfect sense when you look at it from an investor's perspective. The PlayStation console is no longer just a machine that Sony sells you every 7 years. Sony describes it as a gateway into what it calls player lifetime value. You buy the console, then you buy games through the PlayStation Store. You subscribe to PlayStation Plus, purchase downloadable content, you buy controllers, headsets, handheld accessories, and potentially future cloud services. Sony's own strategy presentations emphasize increasing engagement, spending per device, and consistent revenue from content, services, and peripherals. More recently, Sony said it's concentrating on monetizing its existing user base rather than chasing user growth at any cost. Again, from a business standpoint, that is completely understandable, but there is a subtle difference between building a platform people love using and building a platform designed to extract the maximum possible value from everybody already inside it. And I think PlayStation is drifting towards the second one. The PS4 generation felt like Sony was constantly trying to convince people that PlayStation was the most exciting place to play. The PS5 generation increasingly feels like Sony knows millions of us are already locked into our accounts, digital libraries, trophies, and subscriptions. So its main priority is working out how much more each person can be persuaded to spend. That can produce brilliant financial results. It doesn't automatically produce long-term loyalty. The biggest challenge facing the PS6 is that improved graphics are no longer enough. We are reaching the point where every new console generation produces more technically impressive games, but the difference is becoming harder for the average person to immediately appreciate. Going from the original PlayStation to the PS2 was transformative. Going from the PS2 to the PS3 was obvious. Even the transition into the PS4 generation gave us a clear improvement in resolution, scale, and online functionality. But the PS5 already produces visually incredible games. So what is the PS6 actually going to offer? Higher resolutions, better ray tracing, more stable frame rates, more realistic reflections on a puddle. That stuff is nice, but it becomes a difficult sales pitch when the hardware potentially costs considerably more. Sony has said it does not intend to sell next generation hardware at significant losses. It has also acknowledged that rising component costs cannot simply be absorbed forever. That suggests the next PlayStation could be an expensive machine, and an expensive console needs a crystal clear purpose. Sony has spoken about expanding PlayStation beyond the living room, using products such as the PlayStation Portal and potentially experimenting with different ways of accessing the ecosystem. But the details remain incredibly vague, because selling me another screen that connects to my PlayStation is not the same thing as creating a genuinely flexible platform. PC gaming now moves between desktops, laptops, and handheld devices. Your Steam library follows you. Your purchases are not tied to one specific piece of hardware. You can customize how you play, where you play, and what level of performance you want. Nintendo has also understood that hardware must create a different experience rather than merely offering stronger specifications. PlayStation risks sitting awkwardly in the middle. Less flexible than PC, less distinctive than Nintendo, and potentially more expensive than a traditional console audience is comfortable paying. The greatest advantage PlayStation has always had is its games. The original PlayStation, PS2, PS3, and PS4 all had identities shaped by an enormous variety of exclusive software. Few cinematic releases existed alongside strange experiments, colourful platformers, racing games, Japanese RPGs, multiplayer titles, and smaller creative projects. Modern PlayStation still produces some fantastic games. That is not in question, but the first-party strategy has become narrower, slower, and significantly more expensive. Sony currently says it wants to balance major AAA releases, smaller investments, narrative games, and live services, with at least one major tentpole release intended to support each holiday period. One major game a year might look fine on a financial forecast, but it does not create the sense of momentum that a platform needs. A console should feel alive throughout the year. Players should constantly be wondering what strange or exciting things its studios are making next. Instead, modern AAA development has become so enormous that a studio can disappear for 5, 6, or even 7 years. When it finally returns, the game almost has to be a colossal mainstream success because so much money has been invested in it. That discourages experimentation, and when everything has to become a giant franchise, a prestige television adaptation, or a long-term engagement product, you begin losing the smaller games that give a platform personality. PlayStation does not just need more content, it needs more texture. It needs games that exist because somebody had an interesting idea, not because somebody calculated their potential lifetime revenue. I'm not against live service games. Helldivers proved that Sony can succeed in that space when the idea, studio, and audience all lined up. The problem is treating live service as something that can be manufactured through corporate strategy. These games do not merely compete with other products released in the same month, they compete with every game people are already playing. To succeed, you have to persuade players to abandon Fortnite, COD, Minecraft, Roblox, GTA Online, Destiny, or whatever else has already absorbed years of their time. That is brutally difficult, and when Sony directs enormous budgets, studios, and development years towards chasing that market, there is an opportunity cost. Those people are not making the distinctive single-player, multiplayer, or experimental games that could strengthen the PlayStation platform itself. Sony has already acknowledged that Bungie's portfolio did not meet expectations and recorded a major impairment connected with the studio, yet live service remains a major part of PlayStation's wider studio strategy. The lesson should not be that Sony must never make another online game. The lesson should be that the PlayStation brand cannot be built around trying to engineer recurring revenue. A great game can produce recurring revenue. Starting with the demand for recurring revenue and attempting to reverse engineer a great game is where things go wrong. Then we have digital ownership. Sony has announced that new PlayStation games will stop receiving physical disc releases from 2028, pushing the platform towards the digital-only distribution. That is an enormous strategic mistake. Physical games provide competition. Different shops can reduce prices. You can buy used copies. You can lend games to friends. You can sell something when you are finished with it. You can preserve a copy independently of Sony's servers and licensing agreement. Remove physical media and Sony becomes the shop, the distributor, and the gatekeeper. PlayStation has confirmed that because of licensing agreements, customers will lose access to previously purchased Studio Canal movies in September 2026. These are films people paid for, not temporary subscription downloads. Yes, films and games involve different licenses and circumstances, but the wider message is impossible to ignore. When you purchase digital entertainment, you may not truly own the thing you believe you bought. You own access for as long as every company involved continues honoring the arrangement. Now Sony is asking players to trust that same general system with the entire future of PlayStation software. That does not create confidence. It tells people that confidence matters more than preservation, ownership, and consumer choice. And younger players might accept digital libraries as normal, but that does not mean they will automatically accept Sony's particular closed ecosystem. They also understand subscriptions, free-to-play games, PC storefronts, mobile gaming, and platform independence. Sony may be removing physical ownership at the exact moment it needs to prove that buying into PlayStation is a safe, long-term investment. PlayStation's approach to PC also creates a strange contradiction. Releasing games on PC makes financial sense. It exposes PlayStation franchises to more players and gives expensive games another source of revenue. But Sony is currently trying to be open and closed at the same time. It wants the additional money that comes from selling PlayStation games outside PlayStation hardware, while still preserving the console as the premium center of the ecosystem. Sony says it's considering opportunities beyond console carefully and does not want to be constrained by its own hardware. But there has to be a coherent answer to a very basic question. Why should somebody buy a PlayStation? If the games eventually come to PC, some players will wait. If the games remain exclusive, Sony limits their potential audience. Neither option is automatically wrong. Their problem is the uncertainty. PlayStation risks becoming too closed to compete with the freedom of PC, but too open to preserve the absolute necessity of owning its console. Nintendo has a straightforward answer. You buy Nintendo hardware because that is where Nintendo's games and unique hardware experiences exist. PC has a straightforward answer. You play on PC because it offers freedom, scalability, huge libraries, and multiple hardware formats. PlayStation's answer increasingly seems to be buy our expensive box because you can play certain games earlier and access our particular digital shop. I'm not convinced that will be strong enough forever. Sony's biggest mistake would be assuming that dominating Xbox means the next generation is secure. The traditional console war is becoming irrelevant. PlayStation is now competing with Steam, handheld PCs, Nintendo, mobile games, cloud platforms, streaming entertainment, and every other service fighting for people's limited free time. The next generation will not simply be won by whichever company produces the strongest rectangular box. It will be won by whichever company offers the clearest combination of affordability, convenience, identity, trust, and genuinely unmissable software. That is where I think Sony currently looks vulnerable. Its strategy is highly effective at generating profit from the enormous audience it already has, but the next generation success depends on giving people who are outside that audience a reason to enter. And we have improved monetization tools is not a reason. PlayStation Plus achieved record profitability is not a reason. Player lifetime value is increasing is definitely not a reason. Those are results for shareholders. Players need a vision. The frustrating thing is that PlayStation can absolutely fix this. PS6 needs to launch at a price normal people can justify, rather than treating premium hardware enthusiasts as representatives of the entire market. Sony needs to guarantee strong backward compatibility and make it clear that people's existing libraries will travel safely into the future. It needs a regular first-party release schedule containing more than giant cinematic sequels. Bring back smaller games, bring back weird games, give studios room to create something that does not need to become a billion-dollar franchise. Live service projects should exist because a studio has an exceptional online concept, not because Sony wants another recurring revenue stream. And if PlayStation is abandoning physical games, Sony must offer far stronger digital consumer protections, clearer ownership terms, better refund policies, and genuine price competition. Most importantly, Sony must decide what PlayStation actually represents. Is it a premium console, a digital platform, a collection of entertainment franchises, a subscription ecosystem, a multi-device service? It can contain elements of all of those things, but one of them still needs to provide the brand with a recognizable center. I do not think PlayStation is about to collapse. The brand is too large, its studios are too talented, and its current audience is too deeply invested for that to happen overnight. But being left behind does not always mean disappearing. Sometimes it means becoming increasingly expensive, increasingly corporate, and increasingly dependent on an aging audience that has remained loyal largely because of what the brand used to represent. Sony is currently building a remarkably profitable PlayStation. I'm just not convinced it's building the most exciting one. And next generation, that difference could matter more than ever, because the PS6 will not merely be competing against another console, it will be competing against an entire industry that is giving players more ways to play, more places to buy games, and more control over how their libraries follow them. If Sony continues prioritizing monetization over identity, digital control over ownership, and financial efficiency over creative variety, PlayStation might enter the next generation believing it is still the unquestioned market leader, only to discover that the market has moved on without them.